I took these pictures with my iPhone. And whatever anybody tells you, the iPhone's camera has become so good that it can easily stand in for a real camera. For that, you have to know how to use it and most importantly, have the right settings. That's why in today's video we will go over the settings, and in the second part of the video I will give you tips on how to use the camera so you can also get professional looking pictures out of the iPhone. By the way, it is best to have a Pro model iPhone, and if you have an iPhone 12 Pro or better, most of the settings will apply to your specific iPhone as well. Alright, let's go to the camera settings and see what we can do there. If you have an iPhone 16 or 16 Pro, you're gonna have the camera control option, which I completely disabled because in my opinion it brings more harm than good, and if you wanna know why, you can watch my camera review of the iPhone 16 Pro. Let's move to the next setting, which is photographic styles. If you have an iPhone 16 or 16 Pro, the photographic styles will be different than on the iPhone 14 Pro, but regardless of what model you have, I'd set them as standard. And the reason for that is I want to control how the image will look in the end, so I don't want the iPhone to apply any color settings to my pictures. However, if you have an iPhone 16 or 16 Pro, there is one photographic style specific setting, but we will apply that once we're in the camera app. For now, let's move on to the next setting. As you can see, I set to record video at 4K 30 because I think it looks better than 4K 60 and it also saves a lot of space. The reason for that is at 30 frames per second, the video has more motion blur, which makes it look a bit more cinematic than 4K 60. I also activated enhanced stabilization, lock camera and lock white balance. I like to lock the camera because I don't like the jitteriness that comes from switching lenses while shooting video. However, if you like to switch between lenses while shooting video, you can leave the setting off. As for white balance, the iPhone likes to change it depending on the scene, and it instantly gives it away that the footage was shot on an iPhone, which is something that we don't want. As for the other settings, like show PAL format, this activates additional frame rate that are usually used on the television, so if you need them, you can activate this setting. However, I only shoot in 30 frames per second, so I leave this option off so it doesn't clutter my camera app with additional settings that I don't need. I also deactivated action mode in lower light, and the reason for that is that action mode is supposed to stabilize the video, so giving up stabilization just to activate the mode that is supposed to stabilize the video seems counterintuitive to me. And as for HDR video that records in Dolby Vision, I just don't like how the iPhone handles HDR. It looks too fake and it instantly gives it away that the footage was shot on an iPhone. So for this reason I left this off, and it's also easier to color grade the footage later if it was shot in SDR instead of HDR. And when it comes to auto frame rate per second, I also left this off because, as I said, I like to shoot in 30 FPS and I don't want the iPhone to change the frame rate as we should. I set to record slow motion at 4K 120 FPS, however if you don't have an iPhone 16 Pro, you won't have this option. Instead, you'll have 1080 at 120 or at 240. And what I found out, despite them both being Full HD, 120 records much better quality instead of 240. So if you don't have an iPhone 16 Pro, I would set it at 1080 at 120. The settings for cinematic mode are the same as regular video. Again, if you have a newer iPhone, you will have the option to change the sound recording settings. I set mine to spatial audio because that allows for the audio mix feature to work. However, if you have an older iPhone, just set it to stereo so you get more immersive sound in your videos. The next setting we will go into is formats. I set mine to high efficiency because that will shoot in a more efficient format, which will give me more free space. I have never had any problems opening iPhone photos and videos on PC or Android, so for that reason I don't see any point to setting it to most compatible. Next setting is photo mode. If you have an iPhone 15 or newer, you can set it to 24 megapixel, which will give you a 24 megapixel portrait mode shot. As for the standard camera mode, you can still set it to 48 megapixel. Alright, next setting is Pro RAW and resolution control. This is one of the most important settings that allow the iPhone to look like a real camera, and this is why I said it would be better that you have a Pro model iPhone, because Pro RAW is only available on Pro model iPhones. So let's activate this setting and open the options. As you can see, I set mine to Pro RAW 48 megapixel, and because I have the iPhone 16 Pro, I also have the option to set it to JPEG XL lossy. So let's start with the first option. What Pro RAW basically is the ability to shoot the photo while retaining all the information of the photo in the file, which allows you to edit all the information that a file has stored, so you can edit the color and light later in Lightroom. If you shoot in HEIF, you can still shoot up to 48 megapixels, however you won't be getting all the data that the RAW file has, so you won't be able to edit the picture just as good as on the Pro model iPhone. And when it comes to the JPEG XL format, which is new to the iPhone 16 models, I said it's lossy instead of lossless because the quality will be barely any different. However, the file size will be huge. So for that reason, I don't see any point in choosing lossless. Unless you want to print a specific picture, then I would go into the settings, set lossless, take the picture, and then set it to lossy again. Just keep in mind that whether you set it to HE 48 megapixels or ProRAW 48 megapixels, it will still default to 12 megapixels if night mode turns on. The reason for that is that it combines all the 48 megapixels into bigger 12 megapixels, which allows the camera to gain more light. So in low light, I recommend you to shoot 12 megapixels instead of 48. That will give you in most cases a better picture quality. Also, keep in mind that there's no reason to shoot RAW unless you plan to edit the picture later, because otherwise it's just gonna take too much space on your phone and you're not gonna be using the data that the file has stored. Next option is Apple ProRes. If you have an iPhone 13 Pro or better, you will have this option. However, unless you have an iPhone 15 Pro or better, I don't recommend you turn this on, because what the iPhone 15 Pro allows you to do is to shoot log while Apple ProRes is activated. Other models that have ProRes don't allow you to shoot log, sadly. Apple ProRes by itself on an iPhone makes little to no sense. It's more like a means to an end to shoot log, which only the iPhone 15 Pro and 16 Pro have. As you can see, I set mine to shoot log, and basically what log is a flat color profile. It's mostly like RAW for photos. It stores all the color data and light data into the file so you can edit it later. To shoot log, you don't specifically have to activate Apple ProRes. There's a lot of third-party apps that allow you to do that, but if you want to shoot log in the native camera app, you have to activate Apple ProRes. Keep in mind that Apple ProRes takes up a lot of space. However, if you're going to be using a third-party app to record log in H.265 instead of Apple ProRes, let's say, while you will get much more efficiency and your files will be smaller, you will lose all the advantages of a standard camera app like Audio Mix, for example. Next, we'll go into preserve settings. Here are all the settings that we can turn on so the iPhone remembers them instead of resetting them every time we open the camera app. I turned camera mode off because I wanted to default to photos every time I open the camera app, and I turned on all the other options except action mode because I don't want action mode to remain on if I forgot to turn it off. The reason for that is that action mode defaults to 2.8K instead of 4K. Next, let's move to composition. Grid and level are one of the most important settings in the camera app, because a big part of taking a good picture is to have a good composition. The colors and editing are not as important as composition. So by activating grid and level, it helps us compose better. As for mirror front camera or view outside the frame, it is up to you if you want to leave them on or off. As for the fusion camera, I set it to 35mm. In my opinion, it's much easier to compose when you have a tighter lens, and I also think that tighter lenses tell a better story than wide lenses. So for that reason, I have it set to 35mm. However, I also left the other options on in case I might need a wider lens. Portraits in photo mode is another option that is only available on the iPhone 15 and newer. And basically what it does, it allows you to shoot portraits while you're shooting in the standard camera app. All you have to do to activate portrait mode is just tap to focus, and the iPhone will automatically capture the depth data for the picture that you're taking. I also turned on prioritize faster shooting so I don't get blurry photos. Lens correction is also very useful because wide lenses have a fisheye look to them, so if you don't want that, you can just activate lens correction and it will straighten the lines in a picture taken on the wide or ultra wide lens. As for macro control, I turned that on because I hate when the iPhone automatically switches to the ultra wide lens when you get too close to an object. So to prevent it from doing that, you have to activate this option. As you can see, we're done with the settings. However, there are a few more settings in the camera app, so let's go there. First, let's start with a flash and night mode. These options give it away the most that the picture was shot on an iPhone, so I keep them off unless I really need them. Also, as I said, if night mode activates, the iPhone will default to 12 megapixels instead of 48, which I don't want. So I always have it off unless I have my iPhone on a tripod, because then it allows me to shoot 30-second exposures, which in most cases will be better than not activating night mode at all. But again, as I said, I only activate this feature if my iPhone is on a tripod. Next, let's move to the exposure, which I have set to -0.3. The iPhone always tries to overexpose compose the photo for some reason, which makes the photo look washed out and it gives it away that it was shot on an iPhone, which we don't want. So for that reason, I set it to -0.3. Next, we have this arrow here, and most of you probably don't know this, but it gives you control over some more settings. As you can see, all the other camera settings are in here. Next, we have Pro RAW, and if you hold it down, you can choose any format you want. However, I don't need all those formats, so I set it to preserve the RAW settings, which I can activate and deactivate by toggling them. Next, we have live photos, which I deactivated because I hate live photos. However, there's one useful case for live photos, which is long exposure. You can take a live photo picture, open the picture, go into the settings, activate long exposure, and it will give you a long exposure shot, which should look like this. Next, we have photographic styles, and this only applies to the iPhone 16 and 16 Pro. Here I chose the standard photographic style because, as I said, I don't want the iPhone to put its colors on my photo. However, what I did is I set the tone to -50, which will give you much more realistic shadows because the iPhone always tries to lift them for whatever reason and you end up with a washed out photo. So by choosing the standard photographic style and turning it down by -50, you will get pictures that look more like a real camera instead of iPhone pictures. Now keep in mind that the settings that we choose here only apply to the photo mode. So if we go into portrait mode, we also have to drag the exposure down, and the same applies to video. However, for video, I would set it to -0.7 instead of -0.3 because it lifts the shadow even more when it comes to video. So to counter that, we have to set it to -0.7. Here we also have all the other options like ProRes, which you can see how much space it takes. And now that we're completely done with the settings, let's move on to the advices. My first advice would be to learn the rule of thirds, which will help you frame and compose better, and that alone will give you much better pictures. My second advice would be to shoot in portrait mode as much as you can, especially on the iPhone 15 and newer, because those are very good with edge detection. Portrait mode helps simulate an effect that only a real camera has because of how big the lens is. So by adding depth or background blur to your pictures, it will make it look more professional. The only time I wouldn't use portrait mode is when I would like to take a wide picture. And my third advice would be to edit your pictures, which I will show you how to do in Lightroom. As you can see, I have quite a few pictures here that I have taken with the iPhone, so let's start with this one. To edit the pictures, I use presets, which you can find free online or you can buy some depending on what presets you want. I created my own presets, which I will be using today. My favorites one are the second and the fourth one. And for this photo, I think I like this one more. It just gives it that cold and dark feeling. To go along with the preset, I will go into color mix, and I will add a bit of more orange to make the middle console pop up a bit more. As you can see, because the picture wasn't shot in RAW but in portrait mode, it also started adding orange to the keychain, which there was none, but we can counter that. To do that, we'll add a linear mask, go into color and desaturate. And that should mostly get rid of the orange color on the keychain. So this is what we had, and this is the edited photo. Let's move on to the next one. For this picture, I think the second preset works a bit better. I quite like how it looks, but the shadows are a bit too bright, so we'll work with that. We'll go into the light, shadows, and drag them a bit down. Now we'll go into color and add a bit saturation to the orange so they pop up a bit more. And this is what it looked like, and this is what we get now. I could easily post this picture on Instagram and nobody would say that it was shot on an iPhone. Let's move on to the next photo. For this one, I think the second preset looks better, but we have to do some minor adjustments. So to do that, we'll go into color and add a bit of green to make the trees pop up a little more. This already looks much better. But to finish it off, we'll add a bit of blue and maybe play a bit with the oranges. We'll desaturate them a bit so they don't drag the attention from the car. And this is how it looked like, and this is what we have. Again, I could easily post this on Instagram and nobody at the first glance would tell that this was shot on an iPhone. Let's take a look at one more picture, and I think the fourth preset would look better here. And as you can see, it already looks a lot different. We'll just add a bit of green, just so the picture doesn't look too cold and without color. And what I also want to do is to add a bit more blue, go into the mask section, select the key, which Lightroom does automatically thanks to AI, and then we'll brighten the key up a bit just to draw some more attention to the key. We'll add a bit more contrast so it doesn't look too washed out. We can also decrease the blacks and raise the shadows a bit, and this is what we ended up with. This is the before and this is the after. Again, it looks much better and it also looks like it came from a professional camera and not just from an iPhone. So this is all I wanted to show you. If you want to know more about the iPhone camera, I just released a complete review of the iPhone 16 Pro camera, so you can go and watch that. And if this video was helpful to you, please like and consider subscribing. I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so if you subscribe, that would be very helpful. As always, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.